Standard number two, multiply and divide, which you already know, most of you, because you got a little sneak peek at the test yesterday. Sorry about that. So, in this multiply and divide standard, there's really five different things crammed in there. And these are the five things. It starts with positive and negative numbers. So, we've already been doing positive and negative numbers, but we've been adding and subtracting. Now we're going to figure out what the answer is supposed to be, positive or negative, when we multiply or divide them together. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So in today's do section, it's just whole numbers, which are called integers. They're not decimals or fractions. So negative and positive integers we're going to be multiplying or dividing together as kind of like an introduction to this section. And then it starts to get more complicated as far as the numbers themselves get more complicated. They become fractions or they become decimals, and then you'll have problems that it's a fraction multiplied by a decimal or a fraction divided by a decimal or vice versa. And you can't really do that. So you'll have to convert either the fraction to a decimal or the decimal to a fraction and then multiply and divide. So we'll study how to convert fractions to decimals and vice versa. And then finally, we get into a little bit of algebra. Maybe your first look at algebra, I'm not sure. Definitely the first time in this class. And it'll say like x times y, and it'll tell you what x is, and it'll tell you what y is, and then you got to substitute those numbers in for x and y, and then do the multiplication. So that's what it says here in the parentheses, is subbing numbers in for letters, and the letters are the variables, they're called. So that's what we're going to be studying before we take the next test. And we're going to start today with positive and negative numbers. All right, everybody know there's four combinations when it comes to positive and negative. You could have a positive and a positive, 5 times 5. I'm just going to use multiplication because the rules are the same with multiply and divide. So you could do positive times positive. You could do positive times negative. You could do negative times positive. Or you could do negative times negative. All right, those are the only four combinations that you're going to see. They're either both positive, both negative, or one of each. And the negative could be first or second. Okay, so those are your four different options. Everybody knows the first one because that's what you've grown up learning is 5 times 5 is 25. They're both positive. Your answer is positive. You don't even think about positives and negatives. When everything's positive, everything's just positive. That's the easy one. And they're both the same. They're both positive, and it works with the negatives too. When they're both negative, your answer is positive. So that's one way to remember this. If your signs are all the same, your answer is positive. Well, that's not exactly true, and we'll get into this later. When you start multiplying with more than two numbers, if you have an odd amount, then it flips back. It can change down here, but for now, we're just dealing with two numbers for today. If you're multiplying two numbers together and they're both negative, your answer is positive, or if they're both positive, your answer is positive. And then if you have one of each, your answer is negative. Doesn't matter if the negative comes first or if it comes second. So these are both negative 25 as your answer. And that's it. That's basically the rules, as simple as it gets. If they're both positive, your answer is positive, or if they're both negative, your answer is positive. So if they're both the same sign, your answer is positive. If you got one of each, then your answer is negative. All right, I decided to do things a little bit backwards this time. Last time I gave you the analogy of a bank account, and adding or subtracting is withdrawing or depositing, and then your positive and negative numbers are money or debt. And then I kind of got into the rules later. Now I'm giving you the rules first, and I'm going to give you the analogy second, which is right now. So here's your analogy. You don't really need one for positive times positive. You just know that those are positive. Everything's positive. It's positive times positive. All right, when it's a negative times a positive, this is how I want you to think of it. I want you to look at this example right here. Negative 5 times 5. Multiplication is a shortcut for addition. So essentially what negative 5 times 5 is you're adding negative 5 together 5 times in a row. All right, this is like saying you owed $5 on Monday, you owed $5 on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. How much do you owe at the end of the week? You owe $25. So instead of adding negative 5 times in a row, you just multiply negative 5 times 5. That's why your answer is negative. When it's negative 5 times 5, it's like saying this negative 5 added 5 times in a row. That's what multiply means. Multiply is a shortcut for addition. Instead of adding things together this many times, you just multiply it. So if you have $5 debts, you have a total of $25 in debt. That's why a negative times a positive is a negative. So that's really it for the analogy. A little bit easier this time than last time. I could try and give you an analogy for negative times a negative, but the best way to, I think, explain that is that a negative is the opposite of a positive. So if it's, how do you add negative 5 times? It's harder to describe with multiplication being a shortcut for addition. Just remember that if it's negative 5 times a positive, that's adding this negative 5 times. So the negative's got to be the opposite of the positive. If negative 5 times a positive 5 was negative 25, then negative 5 times a negative 25 is the opposite. It's a positive 25. All right, so maybe that gives some of you something to imagine in your head on why a negative times a positive is a negative, because you're adding that negative that many times. Maybe for others of you, it just confused you. So let me go back to the beginning here. If the analogies are not working for you and you're just a rules person, just tell me the rules. I'll do what you tell me to do. Some people are like that. Then here's the rules. A positive times a positive equals a positive. A negative times a negative equals a positive. If you have one of each, your answer is negative. Those are your rules. If they're both the same, your answer is positive. If you have one of each, your answer is negative. And it works with division too. You're going to start seeing division written more as a fraction as you guys get into higher and higher math classes. The division sign starts to go away. So I hope you don't miss it too much, because you're not going to see it very much anymore. Maybe on the holidays or something. So for now, division is going to be like 8 divided by 2 is going to be written as a fraction. Those two things mean the exact same thing. 8 divided by 2, the answer to both these problems is 4. A fraction is essentially a division problem. So bye-bye elementary style division symbol. Hello, high school style symbol. Now, the positive and the negative thing works the same here. The answer to this is positive 4 because everything's positive. If one of them's negative, say the 8, then your answer is negative 4. And it doesn't have to be the 8 as long as it's just one of them. It could be the 2, so you're dividing by a negative 2, your answer is still negative 4. Now, if they're both negative, then your answer is positive, just like multiplying. So multiplying and dividing have the exact same rules. If they're both positive or both negative, your answer is positive. Just one of them, if you have one of each, your answer is negative. All right, so that's your introduction to this standard. This is not going to go away. When we start getting into multiplying fractions and decimals, you're still going to have to deal with some are positive and some are negative. So this is why I picked this first, because you have to know this for everything that we're going to do in this standard. Even when the numbers get more difficult, meaning they have decimals or we have fractions, you're still going to have positives and negatives. You still got to know this right here.